Hi everyone, it's Colin from Recruitment in View, the podcast that talks about everything related to the recruitment industry. I'm joined with Nick Clement, who is Channel Director at Randstad, and we're going to talk a lot about the future of work and the role of outsourced recruitment, MSP, all that kind of stuff, and the impact of it. So it's going to be quite an informal chat at the end of the day, and someone I've known for a time, Nick. So thanks for coming on the podcast, first of all. Give everyone an introduction on, I suppose, first of all, we can have varying different experiences related to recruitment, people from payroll backgrounds, people from agency, maybe people that have come from RPO and MSP, etc. So first of all, give an insight of what a channel director is in recruitment. That was probably a good insight for them. And a little bit about yourself. That'd be great.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. So before I get into what a channel director is, actually, I'm going to caveat something first, if you don't mind. So we're going to talk a lot today, probably quite a free-ranging conversation, but it's important to say that the opinions that I'm talking about are my opinions and not that of Randstad. So if there's anything outrageous, that's on me. It's not on Randstad. So to answer your question, what is a channel director? So it's an interesting job title. It's the second time actually in my career I've had the job title channel director. And essentially what it is a way of describing a role that has lots of different facets that go into it. So there is, I'm sure if anybody's come across the term matrix management before. So you're not directly responsible for individuals that work on these projects, but you are responsible for the project as a whole. So within Randstad, the term channel director is somebody that looks at a program of work and is responsible for that program of work and making sure that each little element of it is done to a high standard. So a little bit about my background. I've been in recruitment for 20 odd years. My background is recruitment technologies first and foremost, but I've moved more recently into the world of MSPs and RPOs.
Yeah, and that leads me naturally, I suppose, in terms of what would you say, in your words, is outsourced recruitment MSP? Because not everyone really gets that in the recruitment industry. They don't kind of fully understand what that means to be a sort of an outsourced partner or that in recruitment.
Okay, so if I was describing this to one of my children, I would say that what I do is if a business wanted to get all of its recruitment work out of its door and get someone else to do it, that's what an MSP and RPO would be. So an MSP is dealing with temporary workers, so people don't work there full time necessarily, and an RPO is more permanent. But essentially, it's just getting everyone to do the work that they within recruitment that they don't necessarily want to do themselves. Normally, these are for large businesses with complicated programs.
In terms of just to add to that, I've been at a few events recently with some MSPs, neutral vends, etc. And the one thing that comes out as really interesting is a lot of, we'll call it outsourcing, recruitment outsourcing, right, as a general term. A lot of it is not the same provider and not always outsourcing every element of recruitment or talent, right, which is quite interesting to see. Everyone's got some sort of hybrid, it seems like, in today's day and age, because more and more of the bespoke need that they sort of flip in between the two of, do we 100% outsource, do we part hybrid, do we only have this element? So it's quite a complex world. Also, governance in different countries is quite complex as well, to be fair.
It definitely is quite complicated, and there's so not one business is the same. So that there's various different facets that sit within those things, like you mentioned, kind of governance or agency supply kind of management or whatever it might be. There is, if identifying a problem within those businesses, or they've identified it themselves, and then they'll go to market and say, well, we need this particular element solved, and it's up to businesses like Randstad to go away and build solutions.
Yeah.
And come back and say, this is the solution that we think would solve these problems for you.
Okay, nice. So what do you think, considering all the complexity, how different it is, What do you think of the role of an MSP or an outsourced recruitment partner is today, considering our emerging sort of world that we're in?
Oh, what's the role of an MSP? I think that certainly kind of there's been a bit of a data revolution over recent years. And quite a lot of business, quite a lot of large businesses recognize they don't have a full grasp of their supply chain. They don't have a full grasp of their workforce. And as more and more laws are passed around compliance and more laws are passed around various factors of the working day, they need to make sure that they are on top of their, I don't know, their large workforces or other elements of that in a way that they have that control to be able to make informed decisions. And so what an MSP and managed service programs of all different types are there to do is to make sure that the programs of work that exist there's visibility of, there is informed decisions made around those in order to be able to save money or increase productivity or whatever it might be. So the role really is making sure that it's kind of like a one-stop shop, kind of one point of accountability to make sure that the work that you're doing and the investments you're making are the best they can possibly be.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were actually genuinely, before we started this recording, we were already off on a tangent talking about future of work and Generation Alpha and all this kind of stuff, right? We should have pressed record sooner. But in terms of that, and I suppose it comes back to what is the role of the MSP today, in the sense that is such a big challenge, particularly in the UK, right? Huge challenge, shortages, and thinking about what that next generation sort of looks like. I mean, what's your take on the impacts of this? Particularly, your world in tech, right, is quite an interesting take on what we're going to start seeing and those challenges right now.
Okay, so that's an interesting question. I mean, I'm not going to pretend I can predict the future. But I can talk about maybe the approach that certainly kind of is come to the forefront and what people are looking to do. So if you are, there's three kind of main cohorts that you can put into any kind of recruitment space, really. You've got the end employer, you have the talent, and in some instances, not all of instances, but many instances, if it's a big program of work, you have the agency. Now, all of those individuals have their own dynamic and their own desires and their own wants in order to be able to find workers or place workers. The dynamics of these businesses are of these cohorts are very, very different. So if you are a big corporate, what are you trying to achieve? So you need it cheap in today's marketplace. Cheap.
I'd argue cheap always, right? That's what every company
wants.
Well, the best talent at the littlest price, right? Let's be honest. That's because we're driven by money as a business, right? Let's be honest.
Of course, but there's another factor to that. You need it efficient. Okay, so a lot of businesses look entirely, when they're looking at agencies, they look at it specifically at the agency margin and go, well, that one's £1 and that one's 50p, so that one's better. However, the biggest cost of any recruitment program is not the agency margin. It's actually the salaries that you're paying. It's the shifts that are working. It's the overtime that you're paying. It's inefficiencies in your systems that don't link particularly well together. It's invoicing that's all over the place. Those are the things that kind of cost the money. It's not necessarily the fee of the agency that's the big problem, but they want it cheap. Okay, and so they want that cheap. And what does that mean for the agency? It means that the agency needs to be more efficient in order to be able to hit some of those cost objectives and to be able to win business. Now, the person that doesn't care that it's cheap particularly, and the person that wants more salary and more flexibility and more everything, is the talent. Okay, and so none of the first two cohorts are not good. Don't mean anything without that talent. So you need to make sure you're engaging with that talent more efficiently and effectively. So this is a long-winded answer, and I'm sorry, I will skip to the point. But if you look at where the market's going and where, technology is going, the first two, the agencies and the direct employer, are looking to utilize technology in order to be able to move that forward.
Yeah.
The talent is still expecting a human-led experience. I'm sure, certainly with the current generation, we'll talk about generational stuff, and generations at the moment would rather talk to a chatbot than a human being, apparently. But from a work perspective, there is an expectation that there is a human being understanding what you're wanting to do and working with you through that. So from an agency point of view, you've got to walk that fine balance between the human interaction. I don't know, I've stubbed my toe and I can't go into work today. How do I let someone know that immediately? And cost. And from the direct employer's perspective, they want some human interaction between that candidate before that person shows up on site, because they could be anybody. So where is this going? I think that what we're looking at is moving from a traditional MSP method to a more technology-led version, which then enables different generations to then work with those businesses, and also it enables some of the trends that we're seeing coming out in regards to organizing complex workforces who require flexibility, who require XYZ, which also helps fill roles, reduce overtime, all those other bits and pieces to do it more efficiently. That was a long answer, and I'm sorry.
No, it was a good answer. A couple of sort of comments to some of the points you raised there. I was just making some notes here as you were talking to remind me. The one thing I do, so I'm passionate is probably the wrong word, or interested in psychology. And the one thing I do think that stops AI or technology or that there's sort of, what's the word, a brick wall with humans around technology, is the fact that if there's no humility and no empathy, you can't get that from a piece of technology. They're very reluctant to sort of go sort of hard into it. And I do think there's a demographic of age in that. So probably I've got to get my generations right, Gen Z probably cares less about that, because technology has always been there, and they're happy to share. And I've got some personal stories about my eldest, who's 15, sharing WhatsApp messages and a joke going wrong because someone didn't understand it. Technology doesn't quite empathize or understand in the same way as when you talk to an adult. An adult can give you feedback, technology can't. Well, it could, but you could regulate someone. But I think it's that element of trust, of that humility or empathy, that's quite an interesting dynamic that will affect tech. But the other observation for me is vendor management systems are like a piece of technology like Field Glass, for anyone that doesn't know, or Agile One, these kind of technologies that exist. And they have surprisingly not stepped up. I've not seen them step up enough to the needs from a tech perspective. So I definitely think it's probably an MSP or an outsourced, as you were sort of saying, that's probably going to drive that innovation in tech rather than a VMS. Or correct me if I'm wrong, that's my assumption at this point in time. I see it as.
No, I think you're right. I think that there's some systems, and I'm not going to name a particular category, but that are very much stuck in their ways. And some VMSs are like that, some aren't. Just to call that out. Don't want the VMS community coming and finding me. Yeah. So some of them are stuck in the way. Some of them are not, and they do have to embrace that change. Well, I suppose there's a running theme across everybody that I speak to that's looking to do kind of MSP's work, is the technology doesn't talk to each other very well. Yeah. And so, that you've got ATS platforms, you've got VMSs, you've got internal systems, you've got all these other things that don't necessarily integrate with each other very well, which means that you kind of need people in between to carry the data from one bit to another for those systems to work properly. And I think as the more efficiencies are found throughout the recruitment process, the businesses that integrate and play well with others are the ones that are going to be the winners. And I think the businesses such as Randstad, I have to say this, who identify where those systems play best with each other. Randstad is a platform agnostic business. So whichever systems work best with each other, that's going to give you the best efficiencies you possibly can. And I think that technology piece, it's always going to go down a technology route. That's 100% going to happen. But it's how do you keep that human element of it and that empathy, as you mentioned. And I think people are always going to want to talk to somebody when something's going wrong.
Oh, absolutely. I think, I work in people-related businesses like HR and recruitment and stuff like that myself, and I don't think you'll ever replace a human. But there are just some things that actually a human doesn't need to do. And I think there are fair arguments around AI, particularly around repetitive jobs, that it's just like they're soul destroying in the first place. Someone doesn't want to do that for long term. Like, you can just, if it's repetitive, it's the ideal scenario to get. But if someone's sitting down with someone and saying, this doesn't work or this could be better, I think you can't replace that but a human. The only sad thing from a very HR hat on here is most people do that wrong. It's the bit that AI can't do and humans are not always trained openly or very good at. But we're going into the HR world now. I think what we should talk about is, and we're going to sit here with a bit of a crystal ball, I guess, and talk about the future of work. But I suppose from a business client perspective, what do they need to do? What do we need to sort of look out for as we look at the trends of what's going to happen? Certainly what we see at this point happening with talent of the future, right? What's that going to mean for businesses?
So I'll talk about the best way. Apparently, the worst way to understand the future is to look at the past, but I am going to look at the past for a second. Okay. The market tends to sit in two categories: customer-led, where you've got like loads of talent floating around, and then talent-led, when you haven't got loads of talent floating around. And I think kind of from an employer perspective, you kind of have to prepare for both of those particular marketplaces.
Okay.
But I suppose if we talk a little bit about where we think the generations of work are going, so we can talk a little bit about Generation Z. I think it is, if I've got my right generation, which is the people coming out into the world of work now.
Yeah, I think they're up to Generation Z is probably early 20s now.
Yeah,
teens, something like that. Yeah, there's too many generations to keep up with. Yeah.
Yeah, so that there is. But what is that generation about? So that generation is about they've lived with technology almost their whole lives. They are leaving university at a time where entry-level roles are hard to get hold of because of the disruption of AI. So it means that they are going to struggle to get onto that first step of the ladder, which is really sad, I think. But it's just where we are at the moment, okay? But what does that generation have to offer? That generation has to offer technology. They're a technology-first mindset. They've kind of grown up with it. And so in a business, let's say, where you have you're going through a transformation process into how you do things using the new technologies that are available to you, having that cohort of individuals would be fantastic for your business. There was a stat, and I will, please don't fact check me on it, but I heard it the other day, which was about technology failing within businesses. So I think it was 90%. In fact, I'm going to remove that number. A high proportion AI programs within businesses fail. Now, why is that the case? Now, is it got something to do with the fact that people aren't adopting it? Is it got something to do with the implementation? Maybe a bit of both. So having people who can speak that language naturally is going to be very, very useful. Also, another thing within Generation Z is that their requirements are little different to when I started out in work, and the flexibility is hugely important. And flexibility can look like different things in different jobs. Obviously, because not everybody has the option to work from home or whatever career they go out in, but flexibility is incredibly important to them. And so flexibility brings complexity. And so I can imagine that in the future, if you're looking at an MSP program, that you're going to have to look at lots of bits of data to understand what's going on, to understand and make sure you're being the most efficient you possibly can be when you're producing something or doing like a job of work of whatever kind.
So there's two things to this, and I'm going to go backwards. So in terms of flexibility, it does create complexity. It does have a huge strain on those that are managed. No one manages the extended workforce or contingent labour in the same way as they should. But when you're dealing with, and you have to treat them in the category that they're not employees. We won't go down classification for today because that'll be a 2-hour podcast. But what I will say is no one manages them well as it is, but keeping, apart from are you hitting your SOW, assuming they're in that capacity, is probably the only way to manage them compliantly. But in terms of even from a HR perspective, I don't think anyone manages remote workforce very well. There's a lot of inconsistencies in it because, and I know we're going down a HR route here, which is also part of my background, but the reason why I mention it is the more we drive flexibility and blended workforces and all the rest of it, actually the more complexity there is in terms of managing them, regardless of their capacity in your business. But the other reason why I mention that is it's an interesting problem because we've never had to deal with it until COVID, and no one managed it in COVID. Half the people weren't even working in the UK particularly, because they were on not referral. There we go. Furlough. I said referral. That was wrong. We're still. What's the word? We're still dealing with the aftermath of that from a workforce perspective, which is quite interesting. The other thing I was going to say is, and I've been involved in a couple of tech implementations over the years, ATSs, VMS. There's a platform that's a construction one that I'm involved in at the minute on a project, and they're big, expensive systems, right, at the end of the day, complex systems, but none of them have got AI. They say AI in the platform, but it just means that there's a bit of automation that can think for you. It's not really AI. But anything around AI, the biggest problem is I don't think there's enough people that understand AI's capability, don't understand the process or what they're trying to achieve, or don't have any vision of what technology should be for their business. So if you lack a vision, understanding of what you're trying to fix, and then trying to implement that, I actually agree it probably is 90% failure rate, actually. I know you won't say 90%, but I will. I reckon it is.
Sure, it is 90%,
but jokes aside, I actually think it probably is really high because I just don't think the people out there have that understanding and that vision of what they're trying to achieve with it is the problem. AI can do so many things, so just chuck it in and see what it can do is almost like what they're trying to get out of it. It's a bit like Copilot on a system, but it doesn't ask it questions, or but that doesn't. What does that really do for unless you're using a bot for replacing a person? But even then, you've got to train that bot to go, well, your job is this, and you're only going to do that, right? Would you agree?
I would agree. I'm going to talk a little bit about AI, if I may. So, first and foremost, right, as being part of the enterprise team here at Randstad, we get bids in. And so reading a bid, I'm not sure if anybody's ever read before, but basically it's a request for information. And quite a few of these bids say, what AI are you using, right? And so somebody somewhere's gone, we need to do some AI. I don't know what it is, but let's just ask about AI here. And so people don't really know they just know they need to do it. They don't know whether or not it's useful or anything else. As long as it's ticking an AI box, you can fill that in. And so quite a few of the bits of technology that you're talking about earlier will just have bits of AI in there. I mean, loads of stuff's got AI in it, regardless of what is particularly useful or not. In fact, it is useful, but you don't know. It's loads of stuff's got AI, but it's like, what is the AI doing to add value to your business? This came up the other day, actually, but cold and warm AI, right? So cold AI is just using AI to perform tasks, process tasks that you know exist. Warm AI is adding benefit to your business outside of that process. So both have benefit, but one is just like, we know that this is a process that needs to be streamlined. Let's use AI for that. Warm AI is using it in a way which maybe is adding more value to it. Uh, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and someone was talking about education. And I think there is a parallel here, so hopefully I'm not too far off track here. But um, people were talking about AI in schools and using ChatGPT to write essays. And I suppose what was it, their take was relatively interesting, and it was like, well, back in the day, we didn't have calculators to do maths. Now we've got calculators. We can raise the standard of maths to do other things. So we can do the basic stuff on your calculator, well, not basic stuff, you can do the complex stuff on your calculator, and it raises the standard of the work that comes out the other end for the individual, for the masses. And the same principle was really, if you apply that to chat, any either AI and whatever it is you want, there is the basics which are being done by the system, but it's up to the human to elevate it beyond that. And I think that you can look at that from an AI point of view within anything that you're doing. You can get it to do the basics well, but it's up to you as the user to elevate it above the standard that you would have produced previously. And I think that for me is the definition of like properly embedded AI, is that how are you raising this, not just how are you getting the boring menial task done, but how are you raising the standard of the work you're doing after that.
Yeah, because and this goes back to mindset, and I totally agree with what you're saying. Some people see, it's like how people perceive AI. I think people perceive AI as a cost-cutting exercise to save them money. They can plug something in that one person does less hire, one less hire, because they're going to do the admin that AI will do for you, right? It's going to fill in that form rather than get a person to do it. We'll get the bot to do it. And I think that is probably where it does go wrong quite often. I mean, it's going to be a long road. Like I say, we could do 20 hours on AI. And I've probably seen about 20 hours of content on AI already, or heard it, right? I went to an event the other day, and he's got his own podcast, and he was talking about AI and stuff like that. And there's a lot about it. I think we won't know. That's a crystal ball one, I think, openly, which is we will find out in time, right?
Well, that's true. But I think we can, I think I'd put my house on the idea that the businesses that use it to elevate their work rather as well,
absolutely, totally agree,
as improve kind of existing processes are the ones that are going to win with it. So I don't want to complain about people who are my customers, but if you're just looking for AI's sake, it's unlikely to do anything for you. But all industries are moving in that direction. How is it going to make things not only easier but better? That's the secret.
Well, I think it's also like who can actually implement it, because I think people do have the vision, but they don't. Again, the irony is there's a lot of people that want AI because they could see and understand some sort of benefit, but I don't think there's enough people that are actually. And it goes back to your we were talking about before. We go back a couple of steps here, which was around Generation Alpha or even Gen Z. The kids that are going to be graduating soon are probably equipped to deal with this than some of the other generations before, potentially. But the only downfall is they're probably very tech savvy. They have no idea what they're trying to fix because they never worked in those industries, right? To understand why it makes sense to, again, what are you elevating from? So we're still going to have some interesting debates, I'm sure, on AI for many years to come.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think those we're back on the early careers programs, and those are incredibly important. Because, as much as I'd like to say I'm not going to live forever, right? And so someone's going to need to do my job, and et cetera, et cetera. So we need to make sure that there is talent coming through in a way that can do my job better than I'm doing it.
Absolutely. Well, I'm just very conscious of your time. You're a busy man. In terms of, I suppose, key takeaways, what would you say if you could give a few tips to businesses looking to hire, what should they be looking out for as a sort of closer for 10, if you like, of the future of work and AI and the things that we've talked about today?
Whew, that is a question. Every business is slightly different. But I think if I was walking into any business, I would be looking at it, the work that you're doing within your recruitment programs.
Hmm.
I would be not only interested in the money going out to suppliers, I'd also be interested in the work that's being produced by your teams.
Yeah.
And so, these people wouldn't have jobs unless they were producing something. So I
Yeah.
think you're it's very easy when you're looking at the numbers that businesses are supplying. You just look at the individuals as a cost, but I think you should be looking at at the benefits, and I think that kind of covers absolutely everything within those individuals, whether they're productive or unproductive, and how those kind of programs of work operate around that. What is your actual goal? So that's what I would say would be the advice I'd look at. It's not just about saving money; it's also about making more money.
Yeah, absolutely. And that will be the difference in their bottom line at the end of the day, particularly if they're very talent heavy or reliant on talent for their money. So, look, thank you very much for coming on the podcast, Nick. And I really appreciate the chat we've had today. We will hopefully have you again soon.